The other day, someone wrote to me via YouTube comments to ask what happens if there is a conflict between one's attachment style and one's internal working model. I had to explain that this is an impossibility. The attachment style is the behavioral expression of one's internal working model. It is your internal working model that determines your attachment style. What on earth am I talking about? What is an internal working model? It's one of a group of constructs, psychological constructs, known as mental maps. And today we're going to discuss a variety of mental maps. Your brain, your mind, is like a huge library of maps. Whenever you want access to a certain feature, you go into this library, you take out a map, you pore over it, and you know your way. Mental maps describe reality, both internal and external. Mental maps allow you to develop orientation and to be able to direct actions with purpose in mind. My name is Sam Vaknin. I'm the author of Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited, and I'm a professor of psychology. And let's start with the first, most intimate experience of reality, your body. We all have something known as body schema. A body schema is the cognitive organization of one's view of one's own body, starting with one's appearance, but also an internal image. Your thoughts, your feelings, they all fit into your body schema. And your body schema includes something called proprioception. Proprioception is the sense of self-movement, force, and body position. You experience your organs, the various parts of the body, in their interaction with the environment via your proprioceptors. Proprioception is mediated via proprioceptors. It's a type of sensory receptor located within muscles, tendons, and joints. So here we go. The first map in the library, the foundational map, is a map of your own body. You have a picture in your mind of your external body, the way you look, the way you act, the way you position your organs, your extremities, the way other people see you, your body, the way the environment interacts with various parts of you. All this is mapped out in great detail in the body schema. And the body schema dictates how you move your body through space and time in a way that creates a sense of congruity, cohesion, and continuity. It's the first foundational mental map. You're beginning to see that a mental map is a mental representation of the world, or some part of the world, based on subjective perceptions rather than objective knowledge. So it's not science. It's the world mediated through you, through your senses mainly, but also through your cognitions and your emotions. A mental map normally prioritizes the individual's neighborhood, city, nation, and gives prominence to more distant places according to personal experience, if you've been on a vacation there. But it also includes cultural connections, family history, language links, level of coverage in mass media, you name it. All the data available to you internally and externally is incorporated in mental maps. Mental maps also include the individual's negative or positive feelings about places, other people, internal experiences, specific emotions, specific thoughts, and ideas, beliefs, values, stereotypes. Research suggests that mental maps vary significantly depending on nationality, ethnicity, region, gender, education, and socioeconomic class. So mental maps are not a universal thing. We do not all share the same mental maps. One could even say that the very concept of core identity is simply the assemblage or collection of these mental maps. And because these mental maps are idiosyncratic, unique to each and every individual has a different identity. And yet, mental maps, as I said, mediate between us and the world. Body schema allow us to position our body in the physical environment and in relation to other people. Body schema allow us to perceive the motion, the force, the posture of our body, but in an environment, embedded in an environment. So the environment is in many ways an integral part of the body schema and of mental maps in general. And one of the major mental maps, one of the most important mental maps, is the intersubjective mental map. The intersubjective mental map is about sharing subjective experiences between two or more people. Intersubjectivity is essential to language, the production of social meaning, and of course, empathy. Intersubjectivity is often applied to relationships between people, especially structured ones, for example, between therapist and client. The intersubjective map is built on a series of assumptions which are all subjective. When these assumptions are investigated objectively, they crumble. One of these assumptions is that we can have some kind of access to another person's mind, that we can know something about another person with certainty, simply because they resemble us biologically or physically. That is, of course, completely wrong. We have no access to anyone's mind, ever, in principle. We have to rely on another person's self-reporting. We have to make assumptions. We have to assume that another person's experience is identical to ours. When they say that they see red, they mean the same thing as when we see red. When they say they are sad, they mean the same thing as when we are sad. All these assumptions are easily refutable. They are undecidable, and so therefore they cannot be studied objectively, and yet they form the pillars and the foundations of what is known as empathy. A mental model is any internal representation of the relations between a set of elements. For example, between workers in an office or a department, the elements of a mathematical problem or a physics problem, the terms of a syllogism or an argument, the configuration of objects in space. When you have disparate elements and you connect them somehow relationally within a unified representation, what you are creating is a mental model. One could argue that mental maps rely on mental models, that in the absence of mental models, maps could not be generated, and if they are generated, they would be highly ambiguous or contradictory, internally contradictory, inconsistent. Models contain perceptual qualities and may be abstract in nature. They can be manipulated to provide dynamic simulations of possible scenarios, and they are key components in heuristics and in decision making. So a mental model of a system, a mental model of an event or a product or other people includes various attributes, roles for operation and handling, and expectations regarding actions and the consequences of actions. Mental models guide decision-making, choices, and ultimate actions and interactions. You could be beginning to see, I hope, a chain. Initially, there's a lot of data flowing in, a lot of stimuli and so on. And then you try to put these data together in a map. And then the map gives rise to the mental map gives rise to a mental model. And the mental model is the gateway to action in the environment and on it. In other words, mental models are the prerequisite for self-efficacy or efficacy. But the difference between mental maps and mental models is that mental maps are idiosyncratic. They're unique to each individual, and they're largely non-communicable. because they are an internal subjective experience. Whereas mental models can be formalized, can be diagrammatically put on paper or whatever, and can be shared. So we have shared mental models. Shared mental models, for example, in the workplace, are ergonomic. They describe a work system that is held in common by a team and its members. So the members of the team collaborate in upholding, buttressing, implementing the mental model. Initially and ideally, team members should have a shared mental picture of the system and its attributes, a shared knowledge of all relevant tasks, and a shared understanding of the team's progress towards its goal. Coordination, efficiency, and accuracy increase team members' convergence on common mental models. In other words, there's a process of natural selection, process of winnowing out. There's a lot of experimentation going on, and gradually people converge on what works best, and then this upholds or supports one of the possible mental models, and this mental model becomes hegemonic, it becomes dominant, and it is considered henceforth accurate and complete. When a mental model ossifies and becomes rigid, it actually reduces efficacy. It undermines the ability to react in real time to changing circumstances and demands from the environment. So mental models, team mental models, need to remain flexible. And now that we have discussed mental models, we can transition to the topic of our video, which is the internal working model. Actually, the full name is the internal working model of attachment. So the distinction between attachment style and internal working model is artificial. The attachment style is the set of behaviors that reflect the internal working model. The internal working model is a cognitive construction. It is a set or cluster of assumptions about how relationships work. Expectations. For example, you expect support and succor and maybe affection in your relationship. Or maybe you expect abuse in your relationships. In both cases, you have an internal working model. Earliest relationships, mainly with parental figures, mainly with the mother, form the template for this internal working model, which may be, as I said, positive or negative. The idea of internal working model was proposed by the godfather of attachment theory, John Bowlby. Attachment theory is a theory that postulates an evolutionary advantageous need to form close emotional bonds with significant others. What attachment theory says, attachment is good for you because it guarantees your survival. It works. Specifically, there's a need for example, newborns, toddlers, to maintain close proximity to their parental figures and to form bonds with caregivers. Otherwise, they won't survive. Attachment theory characterizes the different types of relationships between human infants and caregivers and extrapolates them into adulthood. It has been proven pretty conclusively, to my mind, that early childhood relationships and the lessons learned from them, the internal working model, affect the individual's later life, emotional development, emotional stability, and ability to form what came to be known in the 1960s as, or 1950s as, object relations. Ability to form bonds, attachments, connections, and even mere cooperation or collaboration with other people. This whole theory was developed initially, as I said, by John Bowlby, but the main contributions came later by Mary Ainsworth. Okay, so within attachment theory, we have attachment styles, because each one of us has different experiences in childhood. We tend to develop our own unique, individualistic, idiosyncratic internal working model, which gives rise to the way we treat attachment, the way we interact with attachment, the way we attach or don't attach to people. And so this is called attachment style. Attachment style, according to the APA dictionary, is the characteristic way people relate to others in the context of intimate relationships, which is heavily influenced by self-worth and interpersonal trust. Theoretically, says the dictionary, the degree of attachment security in adults is related directly to how well they bonded to others as children. 4 distinct categories of adult attachment styles are typically identified: dismissive attachment, fearful attachment, preoccupied attachment, and secure attachment. Attachment styles with respect to infant-mother relationships were first described by Mary D. Salter Ainsworth and her colleagues. They identified 2 main styles in infancy: secure attachment and insecure attachment. The latter, insecure attachment, characterized by various patterns such as ambivalent attachment or anxious avoidant attachment and so on. Different attachment styles in infancy are associated with different psychological outcomes in childhood and in later life. When you attach to someone, the process is you have an internal working model which anticipates outcomes. The internal working model is a theory about relationships, and like every other theory, it yields predictions. You orient your behavior, your decision making, and your choices, including mate selection, based on these predictions. You say to yourself, relationships end badly. I'd rather avoid them. So you become avoidant. Or you say to yourself, in a relationship, I could obtain love, affection, succor, and support. So I'm going to go for it. You develop a secure attachment style. So attachment styles are the behavioral manifestations and expressions of this innate theory that you develop in early childhood, known as the internal working model. But in order to develop such a theory, you need to recognize the separateness and externality and inner workings of other people. In other words, a precondition for developing the internal working model is the realization that there are other people out there externally apart from you, that other people are not you and you're not other people, and that therefore you need to grasp or to grok or to understand or to comprehend or to apprehend or whatever word you wish to use the inner workings of the minds of other people, how other people's minds operate, what makes them tick, and this is known as theory of mind. A theory of mind is the acceptance and assimilation of the knowledge that other people have a separate life. They have their own intentions and desires and beliefs and values and perceptions and emotions and cognitions, and that these are not the same as your own. They're different to yours. Of course, this tends to some extent to undermine empathy and the intersubjective assumptions underlying empathy. It's a very, very fascinating topic, how empathy and a theory of mind don't actually go together well. If you have a theory of mind which is rigorous and valid, you're likely to see other people as very different to you. And when you wish to empathize, you need to see other people as very much like you, very much similar to you. So the two contradict each other. It's a topic for another video. At any rate, once you have assimilated and accepted emotionally and cognitively that other people are out there, that they're not you, that they're separate, that they could have their own agendas and their own drives and urges and wishes and dreams and fantasies and plans and so on, that they are not dependent on you, not extensions of you, and so on and so forth, at that point, your behavior changes, your actions change, because you tend to take people into account the way you would take the existence of a physical object, obviously. You will not try to go through a physical object, might end badly. So similarly, accepting that other people are out there and separate from you and external to you has massive behavioral implications, affects choices, decisions, and actions in very meaningful ways. Narcissists fail in this. There's a failure of othering. There's a failure of this perception of others as external and separate, independent, personally autonomous. Children show rudiments of a theory of mind as toddlers because they have a limited understanding of the relation between belief and action. By age 3, this begins to change, and children begin to realize that some beliefs are false and some beliefs are true, and that other people may hold false beliefs. Around the age of 4, children are fully cognizant, fully aware that their beliefs about others may be wrong and that other people may hold wrong beliefs. And this is known as the false belief task. Never mind. Okay. When this fails, when this ability to mentalize, when this ability to create a theory of mind about the minds of other people, when it fails, we have what is known as mind blindness. Mind blindness is a deficit in the ability to conjure up, to concoct, to put together a theory of mind. And it's characteristic of people, for example, with autism spectrum disorder. Someone with mind blindness cannot read the minds of other people, cannot make sense of the minds of other people, cannot decipher or decode what makes other people tick, cannot comprehend social cues, and gets it wrong all the time. They cannot understand behavior in terms of belief, desire, reasoning. Mind blindness is also very common in narcissistic personality disorder. It was first described by the psychologist Simon Baron-Cohen. Not Sacha Baron Cohen, but Simon Baron Cohen. Okay, Shoshanim, I got you there. Now, I mentioned mentalization, which is the process that leads to the formation of theory of mind, which allows you then to create an internal working model, which then affects your attachment style. So, mentalization was first described by the Hungarian-born British psychoanalyst Peter Fonagy. And in his work, mentalization is an ability, a capacity to understand or to comprehend one's own mental state and other people's mental states. So when you perceive or apprehend your own mental states, you derive from that your intentions and your affects, the expressions of your emotions. So it is your mental state that dictates these. You can watch my work on intrapsychic activation model, which incorporates Fonagy's insights. And similarly, once you have created a theory of mind about other people, comprehending their intentions and affects in terms of mental states, their mental states, you are done. You have a theory about your own mind. You experience your mental states which give rise to intentions and actions. And similarly, you apply a theory of mind to other people, and it gives rise to predictions and anticipation and expectations regarding actions and intentions and affects and emotions. It's possible to reformulate Fonagy's work and say that the theory of mind that applies to other people is an extension of, or even a projection of, the theory of mind that you create about your own mind. So it's as if you're, at first, as a child, you're asking yourself, what is my state of mind? What makes me tick? Why do I want to do certain things? Why do I feel this way? And then you create a theory. This is the theory of mind. Which mind? Your mind. It's as if you were observing yourself, as if you were one step removed. It's a bit of a multiple personality thing. And then you take this theory of mind, which has a sample of one, your mind. You take this theory of mind and you apply it to other people. You project it onto other people. Inevitably, when you create a theory of mind about the minds of other people, you have to make suppositions and assumptions. There are boundary conditions, and all these observations emanate from the inside. This ability to mentalize is a component of healthy personality development. When the child has a secure attachment to the parent, it's much easier for the child to develop a theory of mind, by the way. So when we try, for example, to cope with or to treat borderline personality disorder, one of the problems with borderline personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder is an inability to mentalize. And the failure to mentalize in these disorders is because the attachment, the initial attachment to the parental figures or the caregivers has been disrupted. And this gave rise to what became known as mentalization-based treatment. It's a psychodynamically oriented psychotherapy that was developed specifically to address mentalization deficits in patients with borderline personality disorder. By mitigating these deficits, MBT aims to decrease the problems with impulse control and affect regulation that are common to such patients and to improve their interpersonal functioning. This is also known as reflective functioning. Mentalization, reflective functioning, MBT, they're new things, relatively new. Fonergy proposed the concept in 1996. And yet mentalization is the core, the basic, the most primordial atavistic process that starts it all. You mentalize yourself, then maybe you project this theory of mind that you've created onto others. Then you perceive the existence of others. Then you create an internal working model which applies to your relationships with others. And this internal working model gives rise to your attachment style. So this is the sequence. The long answer to the question, what happens when there's a conflict between attachment style and internal working model? Nothing, because this never happens. Your attachment style is merely the outward manifestation and expression of your internal working model.